As journalists and television hosts, scripts are a lifeline. Each newscast, each story, it all revolves around a script.
But now it's time to go unscripted. That means we're not just going off script, we're throwing out the script altogether.
Each week, we're joined by fellow Farm Journal hosts and editors to peel back the layers on stories we've shared throughout the week.
Unscripted. It's real, it's raw, it's entertaining, and it's your chance to meet the personalities behind the personalities. I'm Tyne Morgan.
And I'm Clinton Griffiths. Welcome to Unscripted.
Welcome to Unscripted. I'm Tyne Morgan.
And I'm Clinton Griffiths, and here we are, Tyne. I feel like, it was only a week or two that, you and I weren't, on Unscripted together, but it feels like a lifetime. Like a lot has happened in that amount of time.
I sense the sarcasm, number one. Number two, I have a bone to pick with you, okay?
Oh, please. Yeah, let's
Because
hear.
while I was gone, apparently you replaced me with Chip and Davis. And I start to watch the segment, and all I hear is, hey, Tyne's not in the with us this week. She's not in the studio this week. And Chip and Davis celebrate, like they literally applauded and screamed.
Listen, I can't control those guys, but I'm glad you're here. And you rock it way more than those guys rock it.
I don't know. Like
I'm just gonna say, although Davis did bring made up words, which was something. It wasn't nothing. I'm still using the word faint whistle in my daily conversations, which if you don't know what that is, you're gonna have to go back and listen, like and subscribe. So Davis brought his own made up words, and I think they were kind of clever. They were pretty good.
But how do you match that energy? I can't. How do you?
You don't. It's just Davis. This is a guy that writes songs for his own podcast.
Oh, he's so creative. So creative. Okay, but listen, over lunch I had to take my car for an oil change, so I went and picked it up.
Yes.
And I was walking out the door, and this guy goes, "Hey, you look like one of those ladies that's on TV that does the news." And I'm like, "Well, I actually do. It's an ag news program, and it's okay that you just stereotyped me." So I just want to know, Clinton, has anyone ever stereotyped you like that? Because either they think I'm either on the news or I'm a realtor. I don't know how to take that, but does anyone ever yeah, it must be the hair. Does anyone
I'm laughing because I can see that. Like, oh yeah, news or realty. That makes sense to me.
I'm gonna sell you a house.
Now, knowing you, I would have said wedding planner because you are like crazy organized and good at getting people moving in a direction.
Yeah,
and so,
that's called a dictator. I am much of that. But have you ever been stereotyped though? If somebody said, "Do you do such and such for a living?"
No, I mean, I think it surprises them that I do host a TV show.
Really?
I don't think people see that coming. No, and here's my favorite comment because I get this a lot when I'm out and about. People always go, "Well, you don't look anything like you look on TV." And I'm like, but they never explain. And I don't need people to explain in the comments, okay? I get it. You don't need to explain, but I'm just saying they never explain.
Well, usually somebody say, "Well, I didn't mean anything by it. You look better." Like they're trying to cover their tracks, and you're like, "Quit digging. You're in a hole. Just quit digging."
I think they mean, "Oh, you're taller than I realized on TV."
Well, speaking of being stereotyped, I want to know from our guest this week.
Oh, yes.
If people can guess what he does. So let's bring him in. Our guest this week, the weather wizard, Mr. Eric Snodgrass. He can draw a crowd more than both of us combined, Clinton. I witnessed it at Top Producer. That crowd was not only packed, but I saw the reviews after he spoke. And let me tell you, that man can pack a room. So let's welcome Eric Snodgrass.
The weather wizard, Eric, what's up?
Not much right now. In fact, I'm glad we need to have a little bit of a calmer weather pattern. So if we're talking about what's up, let's just let's keep it a little more calm than it has been. But listening to you two talk about people stereotyping.
Yeah, I want to know.
I think, gosh, I don't know. Mostly I just get, are you just a chubby dad? Is that your job? And maybe I don't think a lot of people know what I do. And to be honest, I really try to avoid telling people that I am a meteorologist. I often slip in that I'm an atmospheric scientist. And there's reasons for that, but one of my favorites is I have a large number of people that when you say meteorologist, they think that I study like astronomy. and they start telling me about all, I'm like, no stars here. I study hydrometeors. That's the wet stuff that falls from the sky. And you would not believe the number of times people have asked me about rocks and all sorts of stuff. I'm like, no,
Oh,
sorry.
meteors. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
You betcha.
But Eric,
So
when did you know that you
Oh.
wanted to be an atmospheric scientist? Okay, I'll use your terminology here. At what point did you know that
Rivers
you
in
were
the sky.
destined for this?
I'm not sure if I still know that I want to do that. No, I got into this in college. Really, I took some great undergraduate classes, chose this as a major, and I was one of those weirdos that never changed majors. I just got into it and stuck with it. And then throughout graduate school, and then while I was a professor at the University of Illinois, I just really kind of fell in love with it more and more. And the reason I like it is every day there's a new problem, and you wake up to something different and try to assess the atmosphere and what it's going to do next. And it's more than ready to humble you every day and tell you how much you don't know about its behavior. And I kind of find that to be exciting, kind of fun.
Yeah, meteorology seems, and this is just somebody that talks about it every day. It seems different though than climatology, right? So like climatology is like a longer look at the climate overall and where we're headed and what things are going to happen. Meteorology is kind of like in the moment, in the now, in the week ahead. But in visiting with you through the years, I feel like you do a little bit of both. Like you look long term and short term.
Yeah, that's why I call myself an atmospheric scientist, because, and this is it. So if you think about it, you have people that are that study the atmosphere, and we would call them atmospheric scientists. But sometimes those people are also meteorologists, meaning they're going to predict the weather. But I know a lot of people that are atmospheric scientists that couldn't tell you a thing about the weather because they study some aspect of it. Maybe it's like climate science or climatology, or maybe it's atmospheric chemistry, all sorts of different stuff. So yeah, it's we kind of do it all, and don't forget, there's this one part of what we do called nowcasting, which is where we kind of just live in the moment and try to see what the next 10 minutes are going to be, not even the next week. So yeah, it's a fun science, but
and it's no doubt that you probably don't know if you want to tell people that you're a meteorologist or an atmospheric scientist, because the next thing you know, they're going to be like, oh, well, last week they said it was going to rain, but then it didn't. And so that's your fault.
Mhm.
And
that's right.
I don't know. Have you ever seen the Nick Cage movie where he's the weather guy?
I have not. I've been told to watch this, and I think I'm going to take time this summer to watch this
You should watch
movie. I've seen the trailer, and it's hilarious.
It kind of tips him over the edge at some point where he's like, people, quit talking to me about the weather. He just gets angry.
Yeah.
Well, and Eric, so once you got out of college, where did you study? Where'd you do your undergrad and grad?
Yeah, I did undergrad at Western Illinois University over in Macomb, Illinois, and then did graduate work at University of Illinois.
And then you stuck around at the University of Illinois for a while, correct?
That's right. Yeah, I stuck around for 15 years teaching there, and jumped to Nutrien in 2019. And that story goes, they just bought a company I started and said, "You want to come along?" I'm like, "Oh, why not? Let's do something different." So yeah, I missed the university. It was an amazing place to work, brilliant students, and yeah, I'm certainly not dissatisfied with my choice. A lot of fun doing what I do now.
Oh, and Nutrien, I mean, it just seems like you just have a lot of freedom. I mean, I know I won't forget. I talked to a farmer this winter, and he was like, "Well, I've got to cut this short. I've got to go listen to Eric speak." He goes, "My wife has this love-hate relationship with Eric because she knows every Sunday night I'm going to listen to him, and I'm either going to come out extremely happy or I'm going to come out extremely angry." And so it's just funny because I mean, farmers, you do such a great job. And I know, is it every Sunday that then you release your forecast on YouTube?
I actually do it every single morning now,
Single
but we do some content that goes out on a weekly basis as
Okay.
well. That's kind of just bigger picture. But it's funny you bring that up. I I've been paid interesting compliments over the years. I didn't know what word to choose there. My favorite was, I had a guy come up to me and he was just like gushing over my content, and the reason why is because when his son, when he was younger, had a hard time falling asleep, he would play my YouTube videos of me doing weather forecasts and just pass right out. And I'm like,
Stop
Well, do you want an
it.
autograph? What do you want? No, it's I've had some.
You're so good at putting people to sleep,
That's
Eric.
right. Yeah.
You're
Put that.
so great.
No, listen,
So,
take it as a compliment because maybe it's because you comfort people. They
I
feel
hope so.
comfortable around you. Listen, I can spin this all day, every day, Eric.
Eric
Oh
is a
gosh.
comfortable shoe. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like a warm hot meal on a rainy afternoon, Eric. So
There you
glad
go.
you can
I'll
help
Well,
take it.
people out.
Eric, as it's principal atmospheric scientist, is that your official title with
I
Nutrien?
Well, that's one of them. My technical title is senior science fellow. So you said a minute ago about freedoms, and they had to make up a title for me, which is great. I appreciate it, but it really allows me just to kind of push the edge on what we're doing with weather and risk in agriculture. And so that's where I got this title, senior science fellow, and it allows me to do everything I do, which is to really reach out to the community and make sure that we're keeping folks aware of weather risk and its impact on ag. And I get to speak at a lot of events doing that, and then just record like you guys are very familiar. I record in my basement every single morning, and find places to get content out the door.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think we should talk a little tea with
Yeah,
Eric Snodgrass.
exactly. You talk about pushing the edge here. Let's go to our first segment, talking tea. All right, you know what spilling tea means? It's exactly the same, talking tea. And the amount of weather that we have had this week alone. You start off last weekend and we had this major hailstorm. And I mean, Eric, my stomach was in knots looking at some of these pictures because these Nebraska farmers saying that this was one of the most beautiful, biggest potential that they saw with their crop gone in seconds, 70-mile-per-hour winds, this hail. I mean, and it was a large swath of the country. And then we're watching Beryl across the country, and it's crazy to see that. And this rainfall map of Beryl to show how much moisture it brought to parts of the country, including the Eastern Corn Belt. I mean, what caused all of this, and what makes it so unique or so significant, Eric, in your eyes?
Yeah, 2024 will be a year we remember as being one of the most active with severe weather. And you're 100% right. When you go back to that event that hit parts of Nebraska, I was just looking yesterday at some satellite data, and the hail scars are so large that they just pop out on satellite data. An early estimate, I'm going to go after about 500,000 acres that were damaged between that storm and some that also hit parts of Iowa and South Dakota as well. But the hail was huge, and it just ripped apart. And I mean, I'll be honest, I talked daily to a guy that's in Nebraska, works for the extension, and he was like, we were on pace for an amazing crop in Nebraska. So to see this come through and do the damage it did, it was heart-wrenching to see that. You got to remember, Nebraska also, what was it, 2 years ago in May, had a massive derecho that actually went from
Yes.
Kansas through Nebraska, knocked over all that pivot irrigation. And I heard that several of the pivots were torn up, and it's not as though they just have an abundant supply of inventory to go replace
Right.
those things. So yeah, here's one of our top producing states that just took a massive punch in the mouth. And to be honest, my biggest frustration with it was where was the market reaction? Like we just didn't see what you would have
No.
expected to see when you get those prime acres right there along I-80 and south, just wiped out all in one evening. So
Well,
yeah,
and
that was
Eric,
rough.
we had the flooding that was in
Mhm.
June that was there along the northern corridor, in the northwest part of the Corn Belt. The market, Tyne really hasn't really reacted to that at all. Some estimates 500,000 acres there, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty
Well, I mean,
bad.
and Eric, you mentioned the potential of that crop in Nebraska. I mean, Clinton, I know you drove to Oklahoma
Hmm.
last week and you saw how beautiful the crop is. I'm in Missouri, Kansas area that we suffered drought last year. It is a beautiful crop. I don't even want to talk about how beautiful it is because it really is, in a lot of these areas. And so I think part of it is we are setting on a huge crop. We're also setting on a lot of grain that apparently farmers are storing, according to USDA's last report. The highest since the 80s, I think, is what on-farm storage is. So, Eric, I mean, but have you ever witnessed a time where you had hail come through, but that was trumped by a hurricane that the market viewed as positive because it was going to bring rain to the eastern Corn Belt. I mean, you have hail and you would think hurricane, oh no, damage bad. And it was in some areas, but the market viewed it as a good thing because of all the rain it brought to the eastern Corn Belt. And look at this track. I know this is your map, Eric, of Beryl and the path that it took. It brought some much needed moisture to the eastern Corn Belt in some areas.
Yeah, my backyard was one of them. We got about 3.5 inches of rain when Beryl came through, and then the next morning another half inch. And it's funny, I can look at my yard right now, and it all soaked in because we needed that moisture. And I live in Champaign County, and it is one of the most productive counties because of its size in the country. And so to see that just get all that moisture was incredible. Now, there were some strong winds with Beryl that were not just in Texas, but were instead in Indiana. A guy over in central Indiana, Bodie Kitchell, was sending out pictures on Twitter of his crop laid down by the winds from Beryl. But I mean, just look at the map. It goes right through central Illinois, northwestern Indiana, southern Michigan. I mean, that's some prime ground there that got a huge drink of water right at the right time, stopping what had been some small, pockets of drought development in that area. So this was huge. And what was amazing about it, though, was that all of the market reaction happened before. It was when we started to say, look, I think the remnants of Beryl aren't going to Mexico. They're going to get into Texas and go right through Arkansas, Missouri, then into Illinois, Indiana. And the moment we had confidence as meteorologists, I thought that ruined it and just, took it out. So it's kind of funny. I had a guy contact me from Illinois yesterday. He's like, man, that was a $1 million rain. And I said, well, I wouldn't call it that, right? I mean, it took the market down. It kind of stole the money that was there. So yeah, and where did it miss? It didn't hit the soaked fields in Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Nebraska, and South Dakota.
Right.
And those places, some of them got a chance to get a little bit of dry weather, although there were storms yesterday in those spots. But that's another thing that kind of baffles me, by the way, is that how wet it's been in the Northwest Corn Belt. I mean, there are some places where when you look over 132 years worth of data, this is now the wettest spring and start to summer. And if it stays really wet for the rest of July, which we're not exactly predicting, but if it did, we'd beat 1993 as well. But I don't think we're going to come close to 1993 at this point. But boy, it's right up there with it. It's incredibly wet. So we ask, is that going to make a fantastic crop in that area when they planted in late May, given that soil moisture is as high as it is? What happens if we hit that area with a late season drought, right? I mean, if it gets dry, you're going to have issues with things like stalk rot, shallow roots. And on top of that, it lost a lot of nutrients. They've not been able to do application. So I look at all of this and I understand the markets are going to move the way they're going to move, but I'm kind of like, hey, there's big problem areas out there that need to be, discussed. So yeah, that's all just happening right now. And we still have the rest of the growing season to go.
Well, we look at the root zone moisture, which is that top 3 feet of soil. And this is the one from just this week. And you can see where it is wet, where we've had quite a bit of moisture. But then those dry areas, I mean, that's where Beryl went. And so this isn't going to factor in Beryl yet. So all of those things together, but I'm with you, like the growing season's long. Early July does not always equate to what we see in mid-August. And so I think, there's always the chance you get hot, you get dry, and you get these. We've had these in previous years where we get these flash droughts, and then all of a sudden it's a mess.
Yeah, and I think this year it still has that potential. I was asked yesterday by a colleague, he was asking me about, are there any weather scares left in the market? And I said, there's probably 2 left. There's going to be one that's going to happen in August, and it'll be with respect to soybeans and anything that's late planted corn. And then I said, we're probably going to start to have a discussion later this year about any sort of a risk of an early frost, because the reality is that the northwestern Corn Belt has not been accumulating heat at a fast rate. And on top of that, they planted so late. In fact, I was looking at north central Iowa. If you planted 105-day corn in north central Iowa on May 20th, it'll reach black layer past the average first frost date. So if we have an early, one-off frost event, that's average. And so there's a vulnerable crop in that area. And I also would just say that we've seen a lot of places throughout the Midwest already reporting tar spot. We were worried that Beryl brought up some southern rust. And if over the next couple of weeks, those start to show up, those are all things that are yield robbers. And so I don't think there's a crop there. It had a potential. I think we've kind of dinged it a few times here, and we need to see what that's going to do.
Eric, let's take a look at the 30-day forecast. And I know this is for July, and here we are, here approaching mid-July. So we're halfway through here. But this is what NOAA expected. And you look at really, we're seeing that heat this week, not only in the West, but also the East. So you have that. But as far as the precipitation goes, it's hard to forecast things like hurricanes. So did that change the precipitation outlook at all? And then I want to get your outlook just on temps too for the next 30 days.
Yeah, on the precip side, it certainly did because Beryl, of course, in July went right through some of that area that's marked as below normal precip. I think the Northwest is a pretty good bet that they're going to be very dry and they're also going to be quite hot at times. But what we've got right now in the upper Midwest, this is kind of a term we often use with respect to hurricanes, but we're kind of calling the upper Midwest a brown ocean. In other words, there's so much water in the soil and in the vegetation that it will be locally evaporated and recycled, meaning that any chance we get of something that can initiate a storm, because there is moisture available, it'll make a storm. And so you're going to see that in the next several days here, even this weekend, as this heat comes in. I mean, we're going to get hot this weekend. We're going to be pushing, storms right through that same narrow corridor, those same states we just discussed. And some of them will produce some locally heavy rain. But the temperature forecast, I can't disagree with, because even with the heat that we're going to be getting over the next few days, I mean, through this weekend, we will be well into the 90s. The Western Corn Belt will be seeing temperatures that could approach 100 degrees. We have a front coming through next Tuesday, Wednesday. It's going to go right through that area that says equal chances. And we're going to drop those temperatures back down again to more comfortable levels, which is critical because there's going to be a lot of corn pollinating all the way through the end of end of July into early August. That's going to need to have some cooler weather when it does that. So yeah, I like it. I like CPC. I like NOAA. I think they do a fantastic job. There's a lot of pressure put on them to do this well and do it right. And their scientists are pretty top notch guys.
Eric, as we talk about the maturity of the crop, I know where I'm at. I'm not seeing tons of tassels just yet, which was good for all this rain we just had come through. And I didn't feel like the crop was way ahead as I was driving across the country this last week either. How do you feel about in Champaign County?
Yeah, not here either. There's very few fields that I've driven past recently that are tassel. Usually we're, peak right now or done in some places. But there was a bit of a late plant here because of how wet it was back in April and May. But I drove last week on Saturday from northern Wisconsin straight south all the way to Bloomington, Illinois. So that's in McLean County. That's a big one for crop production. Then over to Champaign, I counted 6 fields. I saw 6 from the interstate that were at tassel. And what was also interesting was when I went over the Wisconsin River, it crossed it 5 times. Every single time it was flooded. When I hit the Illinois River, very low. So that shows you before Beryl how dry parts of the Eastern Corn Belt were. So just important to see those differences.
Yeah. Well, it is fascinating this time of year. Tyne, we always talk about this with Eric. Do we want to talk about the little brother, little sister, El Nino, La Nina
Well,
transition?
that's actually what I was just going to say, because just
I
set
can
the
see it on
record
your
straight.
face. I can see it on you're like, you haven't asked about La Nina yet.
God, well, just set the record straight for us, okay, Eric? Because I lose track. Are we transitioning? Have we already transitioned? Like, where the hell are we at this point, Eric?
We're neutral right now. So we're transitioning. So if you just want to rewind these past few years, we had 3 years of La Nina that ended last year. Big El Nino came in last winter. That was part of the reason why the winter patterns looked the way they did. That was out the door by February. We've been INSO neutral since. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of folks out there over attributing what's going on right now to La Nina, but La Nina is just not there yet. And if you say, well, what is La Nina? Well, La Nina is this. La Nina is when the trade winds, which go along the equator from the east to the west, they speed up. They get going real fast. That's what makes all the cold water show up. We've had a little bit of cold water, but there's no strong trade wind signal. And you say, well, why do you care about the trade winds? Well, if you make the trade winds go fast, the westerlies, which hit us, slow down. That's why we tend to worry about drought when there is a La Nina. Well, neither of those 2 things have happened. It's been very much neutral. We've been much more dominated by these big, warm, like epicenters of heat in the ocean, one in the North Atlantic, one in the North Pacific, and that's what's been governing the position of the jet stream for us. So yeah, neither. And if we do this again in the fall or winter, then we'll have something to talk about, because that's when the biggest influence of a La Nina or an El Nino typically happens.
It's interesting. we get into the fall and the winter, and always during winter meeting season, which is a different season for farmers, we always talk about La Nina, El Nino. What's going to happen? What's happening in South America? At this time, do we have any indication of the fall, the winter, what's going to happen in South America as we go into this year?
Well, we
Like
know they're
total
going to
crop
add a bunch of
failure?
acres.
Yeah, Eric, total crop failure? Is that in in South America? Is that in the forecast?
There are
So
no
Tyne said
Brazilians
it, I didn't
listening,
say it.
right? No, I would really hesitate to say that, and the reason is that let's imagine by the time we get into our fall, their spring, that La Nina does start to show up. That tends to produce drier issues way down in southern Brazil and Argentina. It's not a
Okay.
Brazil issue. So last year with El Nino, the Brazilian monsoon was 3 months late in really getting going, but it rained like mad in January, and that's when the beans needed it. And there you go. So this year, two things I think that are important. La Nina will be part of the discussion, but have you guys heard? There's been approval for more Brazilian states to plant on September 1 rather than September 15. So last year, a couple of places got to plant early on September 1 versus September 15. Now they've petitioned and they can all do it, but they won't
That's
do it unless
mandated?
there are a lot. I was just talking to Arlen Suderman about this and some other folks, and there has been a major petition, and some have been granted permission to plant early. We need to fact check that to make sure that it's the case. But if it is,
I have
it'd
no
be
doubt. I
yeah,
mean, I'm thinking about if you did that here, like, hey, those ultra early planted soybeans that you like to
yeah,
try? Uh-uh. Can you
yeah,
imagine?
yeah. So there could be a very early planted crop down there if the rains come in. They're usually waiting on about 2 inches of rain to get the seed bed right, and then they go pretty fast after it. But the increase in acreage that's expected, and I know you all know this because you talk about it, but the relationship with China, I think it's going to push Brazil to just go after it hard this year, and we are going to have to watch it carefully.
Yeah. Well, it's always a conversation in the winter, and I know, our viewers, they really want to try to keep tabs on it because most of them have grain in the bin that they're trying to sell, and what's happening down there is driving prices here at home. And so, it's interesting to see what goes on there. It's out of our control, but the least we can do is keep up with it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this: you bring up international weather. And we talked about markets a little. I'm surprised that we've not had more of a reaction out of the drought issues in Ukraine and Western Russia, because just this morning I looked again, the NDVI, that's satellite measured plant health, right? They're the lowest they've been in 20 plus years. And I look at all of
Wow.
that and go, well, why is no one caring? Now I realize summer crops versus winter crops in that area. Okay, they do grow summer crops in Ukraine and in Western Russia. And I'm just surprised that we're not hearing more of a story out of that. But maybe there's something else going on there that I'm not aware of.
Yeah.
Well, other
Interesting.
than the puzzling dilemma with the markets and why it's not reacting to all of this news, because I think we're all in the same boat. We need to get to our next segment for some of those other crazy headlines. What the Sigma? Okay, even though you have teenage kids, Eric, you're telling us you really aren't up with the lingo. Well, you've heard it, you just don't know what it means.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's all
Eric,
sorts of things that are said. And I'm like, whatever. I'm just.
Eric, join the club. I don't think they know what it means. Okay, I learn a different phrase all the time from Clinton, and then I'm like, okay, what does it mean? And I'm beginning to realize that these kids don't even know what it means. But anyway, this is the craziest headline that you've read or you've written. And Eric, there are some crazy headlines when it comes to weather. I know there's always, I mean, they're very sensational headlines when it comes to weather, but have any stuck out to you lately that you're like, you know what, that was just flat wrong?
Oh, where do we start? The $1 million rain one we had to go after, but that wasn't the crazy one. That was just, I think, a misinterpretation. I'd say the craziest one that is people that think we're turning on weather machines to ruin the crop. Like there's a
Come on, Eric. You're turning on those weather machines. Stop it. You got that big switch at your house and you're just turning those machines on. I know.
Eric, what do you think about cloud seeding?
Well, we've actually done a ton of research on cloud seeding. So I'll just give you the real short of it, but it'll hopefully make a lot of sense. The most effective cloud seeding. So this does work. All right. So you're introducing into a cloud the particles on which you can get water vapor to condense. It's called a nuclei, right? So we will put these particles into clouds, especially on the windward side of mountains. So I'm talking about in the west, because you have a permanent lifting mechanism. It's the mountain. So if you seed the cloud going up the mountain, you can promote better snow cover. And we've been doing this for a long time in the west. It's very tricky when you do this without a mountain. If you go up and seed a cloud in the Midwest, well, it may move into a less favorable environment and evaporate anyway, never get any rain out of it. Or you may make rain for someone a state away, right? So seeding where there aren't mountains is not a proven technology according to the research, but in the West, it certainly is. But no, the conspiracy one that I got repeatedly with Beryl was that there's a large radar that's in Alaska that is designed to study the ionosphere. That's all it's designed to do. You look at all the specifications of it, that's it. It's just trying to look to see about fluctuations in the ionosphere. It's about communication, about more than anything else. Well, there are people that think that we turn that thing on to like ruin weather patterns, or the government does it to like ruin the markets. And I'm like, are we really having this conversation again? And what was really funny about it was they blamed that radar, it's called HARP, I'm sure you've heard of this, for like 4 or 5 years, even when the radar wasn't on. Like it had a moment where there was no funding, so they just shut it off for a while. People were still blaming. I'm like, it hasn't had power in 6 years, so what are you doing? But anyways,
really interesting corner of Twitter and the internet, because like this isn't a conspiracy theory I've really come across. Now the cloud seeding conversation, we've done some research, some stories and written some things on that, but the radar causing changes to our ionosphere, that's a new one for me. I'm gonna have to see if I can't get in there, with a flashlight and look around.
I know who I'm gonna blame. I'm going to blame from now on. Just, look outside. If the weather's not something I like, I'm just going to say, damn it, Eric. I'm just going to start blaming Eric.
Turn it off.
Turn it on. Turn on the HARP machine.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Right,
so
go for
going,
it.
Clinton?
No, do it.
Okay. So my What the Sigma, it'll air on the show this weekend. But recently, one of our videographers, shout out to Matt Mormon, he traveled to California without me because apparently when it's a sunny like Palm Springs, California, I don't get to go. But if it's in the middle of nowhere where I live anyway, yep, let's send Tyne. So anyway, I didn't go to Palm Springs, but he did. So he went out and he visited an avocado grove. And I'm like, perfect. Can you interview someone? He goes, I'll see. I said, okay, I'll send you some questions. He interviewed this company and this grove right outside of Palm Springs, California. I did not realize that avocados, it's a very hardy fruit, okay? So it has kind of a long shelf life in these groves. And these trees are so tall. And there's this one individual, her name was Jackie, and she harvests 90 to 95% of their crop. 90 to 95% of their crop. This one petite woman. And all I have to say is, I'm not sure what she gets paid, but it's not enough. That is what I learned from the conversation. But I learned so much about avocados. I didn't even know that's how it was harvested by hand. But there's one woman, because they say if demand upticks, if there's a big uptick in demand and they're not able to keep up, or if weather or something, then they can bring in a crew. But if not, Jackie harvests up to 95% of the crop, and that is mind blowing to me.
Wow.
At that one farm, though, at that
one farm. But yeah. I mean, these trees are like,
I went to an avocado ranch. What do they call them? Avocado grove one time, and shot a story. And it's on a side of a mountain. So they're like, the trees are here, and they're like picking with ladders up to this side. I mean, it is like 30 or 40 feet in the air.
Yeah.
And Russ our photographer, he nearly fell down the mountain. That's a whole other story. Thank goodness he rolled into a box of avocados and stopped him.
Eric, I'm laughing because this is actually true. Russ always falls, and so this does not surprise me. But that is the thing.
We've lost.
It is not even terrain. It is hilly terrain. So not only is it, you're climbing up these trees, you're climbing up and down, and it's when you think about your chute that's full, and then you're climbing back. It's crazy to me that this one person does all of this, especially when the terrain is what it is in some of these avocado groves. Anyway, that's my What the Sigma. And maybe I was so interested because I don't live in that world. So learning about avocados was really interesting. But I mean, you corn and soybean farmers, I don't want to hear you complaining, okay? Because I've watched what she does. You have nothing to complain about.
That's right. All right, Tyne. My What the Sigma this week. and I'm going to get Eric to weigh in on this. I read a story about a motorcyclist who had died while riding through the heat of Death Valley National Park. Temperatures broke to a record high 128 degrees. And so now they're investigating what happened. I guess 5 other people had to be treated there. But 128 degrees, Eric, in Death Valley, I don't think that's a vacation.
No,
I mean, I'm just saying that.
I certainly would not ride through that.
But it's a dry heat. So, that's what they always say. It's a dry
Death
heat.
Valley is, it holds the world record for the greatest, highest temperature. An interesting story about that was that record was actually set, I believe, in 1913. And how it got set was, so it's a valley. It's below sea level, right? So you get incredible heat in there. Well, that record was then broken by a place in Libya, which stood for 90 years. They then did some research, maybe about a decade ago, and found out that all of the surrounding weather stations around that one that set the record in Libya were 7 degrees colder. So they found that there was an instrument bias, took the record away from Libya, it came back to the United States. So 134 degrees Fahrenheit, 2-meter temperature is the record. Now that's 2 meter. You get now down to the pavement and you'll measure pavement temperatures that approach like the boiling temperature of water. I mean, it's so very hot. So yes, if you are not, riding through that valley,
can you imagine on a motorcycle?
No,
which is hot already, on pavement, which is hot already, in Death Valley, which is hot already.
Can we back up a minute?
Disappear into smoke, wouldn't you? Just like, and there goes the bike.
Can we back up though? You are full of the oddest and craziest information. And if I ever make it on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I'm phoning you. I am phoning you. You are a shoo-in.
Eric, I see this all the time. Speaking of corners of the internet with conspiracy theories, I see this question all the time about the hottest summers on record. I've seen a lot of posts recently about 1936 being one of the hottest for the U.S. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. That was. You look back at most temperature records for the central United States, and they were set in 1936. Or I think 1939 was another hot one. I'll have to go back and look. But yeah, that was a year where both the Atlantic and the Pacific were cool. So what ended up happening is all the heat just lived in central North America. This was also, in the middle of a decade-long drought. So we didn't have any water in the soil to effectively evaporate. So you got a lot of what we call sensible heating. That's where the sun goes straight into baking the ground rather than first evaporating water, which gives you a bit of a cooling effect. So yeah, you look back, there were temperature records set back there that I hope we never approach again.
Oh, absolutely.
Are we going to break it this year?
I don't think so. I think those records are going to continue to stand for a lot of folks. But with the heat wave that was just in the Western United States, what you're talking about, Clinton, there were records, all-time records that were broken at some weather stations in the West. And that Central Valley of California, we had 3 or 4 days in a row of 115-degree average temperature. Remember, California grows, they lead the country in the production of over 40 different fruits and vegetables. So this was huge for water resource. And if you want another weird thing, Tyne, okay, so the Bellagio.
Bring it.
Yeah, the Bellagio pools that are in Vegas.
Yes.
When it gets this hot, so that's I believe, if I remember right, it's about an 8-acre pool. Every day when it gets this hot, they can evaporate over 120,000 gallons out of that pool just from the heat. So they have to constantly keep that thing full to make sure it functions well. So it's nuts when you get out in the West and just think about how water is managed in that area.
Wow. Meanwhile, last week I was in Oklahoma and I believe it was 100% humidity and 98 degrees and it felt like 117. And I was like, oh, this is why summer in northern Indiana now.
You've been out of it too long. You've been out of it too long. So you're just not accustomed to the.
I know. And I've got family there and they're like, oh, it just feels so good on my back. It makes all my muscles stretchy. And I'm like, I get it, but it's also really hot.
Miserable. Sure. All right, let's go on to our next segment. TMI, can't believe this happened. I've got a lot of TMI, can't believe this happened on this.
Do it, Tyne. Do it.
No, I'm just kidding. Eric, do you have anything that you wanna start off with?
Well, I'll say this, and since we're going back to corners of the internet, the funniest things that always happen every time there's a major severe weather event, and that is people will go out and post stuff from different storms from decades ago or previous years and say, "Oh no, this was from this year." I'm like, "No, come on." We have these meteorology police out there that just go around and tell everybody that it's garbage. But my favorite, funny thing I saw on social media this week that I just started cracking up was that someone did a really good job showing the flooding in Galveston. Now that's very serious. The storm
Mhm.
surge, the flooding that was in Texas. This is
Mhm.
not to take away from that. Plus the power outages there have been unreal. But someone put like very, very convincingly what looked like Godzilla coming out of the water. And after watching and seeing the seriousness of everything going on, I get to this tweet and I just lose it laughing. And so yes, that kind of stuff on Twitter. Every time there's a hurricane, you're going to see the same picture of a flooded roadway with a shark swimming in it. It's totally fake, but they put it out there all the time. And I got people that ask me, they're like, what's going on? Do we have sharks coming up from the Gulf? I'm like, no, you live in Illinois. This isn't possible. Like, don't believe any of this. But with movies like Sharknado out there, people
Oh.
don't know. So there you go.
Eric, is there anything about Beryl though that made it so so
I thought
rare?
you were going to ask, is Sharknado really real? And then I was
That's
like,
my
oh,
next
please ask
question.
that question.
That's my next
No, I'm just
question.
Hey,
No.
Twisters is coming out though. We do have
Oh.
that's in 8 days. Twisters.
Are
I
you
can't wait.
Oh, so you're
Are you
excited.
kidding?
He's got
Yes.
the
I mean,
countdown. Oh,
yeah, I
that's hilarious.
saw the original one, what came out in 1996. I was 16 years old, drove to the theater and saw it. It was amazing. I wouldn't say it was like the movie that made me a meteorologist, but I loved
I
every
was
second
about to
of it.
ask.
Who'd you
Yeah.
go with?
In
Who'd you
fact,
go with?
I can't remember. That's just what's
Oh,
sad.
come on.
I
What was
may have gone by myself. I wouldn't I wouldn't doubt it. But I'll tell you this, that movie, since then, I actually, if you ever want to see this, I actually have done, it's 75 minutes long, but I made a 75-minute long presentation all about the bad science in Twister. Now listen to me carefully. Of all the movies about weather, though, okay, Twister is by far the best in
Mm.
terms of kind of representing what we do in this field, but it's terrible. So that tells you how bad all the other ones are. So don't go
That's
watch
hilarious.
2012 or Day After Tomorrow or Geostorm. Those are terrible, terrible movies, and don't represent our science well. But I've heard that Twisters, the new one coming out, they did a lot of consulting with people with degrees and people that do this for a living, and it could be amazing. And I'm pretty excited about it. But I don't remember, what did you ask me, Tyne, a minute ago? I kind
Yeah,
of
you're going to ask about Beryl time. Sorry, and I interrupted you about Sharknadoes.
Listen, I saw a tweet from, I think it was a plant breeder or something. He's like, listen, I've been in the business 20 years. This is only the second time in my career that I've had to, pollinate corn during a hurricane. And so saying how rare this was, and he's in
Yeah.
Illinois, just to see that this moisture, this hurricane infused moisture come up across the corn belt. But, a lot of meteorologists were totally geeking out as they were watching it go through the ocean and just, its path. But what made it so unique? Is there anything that stood out to you that really you will remember about Beryl?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'll remember most about Beryl was, first of all, it was the earliest Cat 5 developing hurricane we've seen. And why? That's the thing. The Atlantic is very, very, very warm this year. So it's one of the warmest across what we call the MDR, the main development region, into the Caribbean, into the Gulf of Mexico that we've observed. And as a result, as this is coming through, it just had all of the energy in the ocean that we typically give it in September. It was just already there. The other thing was the forecast as it went toward the Yucatan Peninsula. A lot of folks thought it was going to go to Mexico, and we started to see that turn coming north. And to be honest, it reminded me, and I'm going to have to remember, I think it was 2018. The very first named system of the year was Hurricane Alberto. And that one, and now it wasn't a hurricane, it was just a tropical storm, but it also came up the gut of the Mississippi, rained in Indiana and Illinois. And we had enough rain out of that we were set for 6 weeks in this part of the country. So Beryl, I was just talking to another Illinois farmer that said, I don't think I need another rain till mid-August and I'll be fine. And if you got deep topsoil and you can make that statement, best of luck to you. But that's the reality of it. This was a very unique situation, and it was a strong system, and it kept its moisture around. I mean, it's still raining today in Quebec from Beryl. So just think about that.
Interesting. Eric, I saw several posts about, it seemed like and I don't know, this is the internet, right? So you can't believe it all, but it looked like they talked about
No,
two
it's
different
true.
eyes like pulling apart. Did
Sure.
that happen or no?
Yeah, Hurricane Beryl went through a couple of what we call eye wall replacement cycles. And so what happens is the hurricane creates a real tight inner eye, and it'll oftentimes collapse and disrupt, and another one comes in on the outside. And
Ah,
when that second one comes in on the outside, it's a rapid and rapidly strengthening process for the hurricane. And it did that when it hit Cat 5 stage. It was doing what we call an eye wall replacement cycle. That was out in the Caribbean, though. But
Right.
right before it made landfall in Texas, it did intensify again up to Cat 1, but there were 100-mile-an-hour gusts along the coast there.
interesting.
Mhm.
Interesting. Well, Tyne, as far as you know, I can't believe this. Elon Musk came out with its Neuralink. Did you see that? They
Yeah.
came out and said that they have plans to implant the device into a second patient in about a
Mhm.
week. I just find that technology kind of fascinating, and I don't know. I just, Eric, as you look at the technology in your space, is there anything out there where you're like, this is unbelievable? I can't believe we have this kind of
Right.
technology now.
Well, let me give you two answers, and I hope you like this
Okay.
first one. So, if you saw that announcement, Elon Musk did a kind of a press conference. If you go two
Mhm.
people down, he was sitting in the middle of a group of 5 people. The kid that was sitting down to, when you looked at the screen to his right, is actually my business partner's son. So he used to live
No
right over
way.
there. He
No
played
way.
basketball, yes, in my
This is so
driveway.
random. I did not know
Yeah.
this.
No, no, no.
This is unscripted.
So
Eric, can
here's
you get us in touch with Elon? We'd like to bring him on our podcast.
we'll see what I can do. But his name is Bliss Chapman. And so this is the fun part of the story. When he was a graduate student at the University of Illinois, so he studied computer science, I had hired him to work for me at my first company called Agrible. He helped us build a really popular app we called Pocket Rain Gauge. Well, anyways, in graduate school, he and his friends had this wacky idea of trying to map the brain waves of a dog. Make the dog wear a little thing and map its brain waves, train a data set, that's the machine learning side of it. And just like in the movie Up, put a little voice box on it. And whenever the dog was thinking treat, those brainwaves would be translated in the box and it would say treat, or I got to go to the bathroom, whatever it was. And it was a huge success. And I don't know the full story, but somehow Elon Musk and his team sought out Bliss, who you can imagine had offers from Apple and Google and everybody else in between. And he went there. And if you ever see the video of the guy playing the video games and matching the dots, the guy sitting next to him is my neighbor and my former business partner, his son. And all 6 of that guy's kids are brilliant like that. They do amazing things. And I can't believe it. I used to shoot baskets with that young man in my driveway, and here he is doing that
That
stuff.
is awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. What a cool story.
Yeah. So I know him. I don't know Elon, but I know Bliss, and he's pretty good. So here's my second answer to it. What's going on in our field that I think is pretty amazing? In the last 6 months, just like with a lot of things, the machine learning that's been enabled through the explosion of artificial intelligence has really changed our ability to do forecasting. We now have supplementary forecast models run on AI enabled machine learning, and the Europeans were the first to come out with this. I just participated in a seminar hosted by NOAA and NASA about the future of this in the United States. And it's going to be an amazing thing because, to be honest, what are the biggest sources of uncertainty for our growers? The 3 of us hit 2 of them, right? And then we talk about the third. The 2 we hit is news, we hit weather, and it's markets. And those
Right.
3 things cause such chaos. So if we can start to take one of those things more off the table and de-risk the situation with better weather forecasting, it'll be amazing. But you know what'll happen? If we get better and better at forecasting, the week 1 or the week 2 weather, guess what the markets will start to move on? Week 3 and week 4.
Yeah.
They're always going to move on the story that's out there in the future. And I think that'll be the case because money's made where there's volatility, and we certainly know that. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about the AI stuff happening in predictive science.
How you said predictive science, and that's my question.
Mhm.
How far out is really possible?
Well, I'll give you the answer as to how far will we ever be able to give you an accurate forecast. So we have to define that. That's right. So what's the skill? The skill meaning that we would be within 3% of error, an error allowance of 3%. So if I'm going to forecast 100 degrees, if it's 97 to 103, we're good. Okay. This was actually answered back in the 1940s, post-World War II. There was a guy by the name of Edward Lorenz. You've probably heard of him. He's like the godfather of chaos theory. You remember like Jeff Goldblum talking about, you remember the what was it, 1993 Jurassic Park, and he's dropping the water on, I forget her name's hand, and talking about chaos. All right, he's stealing the lines from Edward Lorenz. Back in the 40s, that guy published a paper that said the farthest you'll ever be able to look out and forecast the weather accurately will be 21 days. And that, again, is your backyard forecast within 3 degrees or 6 degrees of error. And he says the reason why is because if you want to trace backward in time to find the origins of a weather system, you typically lose it in noise back beyond about 21 days. Most of them crop up within 10 days. So 10 days from now, here in the Midwest where I live, something's brewing probably over the Himalayas. It's going to meet up with something in the tropics somewhere. There's going to be a little bit of polar influence to it, and it'll eventually end up as, I don't know, rain or storms or sunshine here. The combination of those events limits our predictability. Now, if you want me to just give you an over-under, we're going to get better and better at that going out 6 weeks, 10 weeks, and beyond with time. But in terms of an accurate backyard forecast, that'll be our limit. You want to know what it is right now? 3 days. That's where we're at in terms of giving you an error bar that small. We're about 3 days out, giving you that kind of error bar.
So you're saying get to 21 days, and that's a big jump in the ability to do it.
Well,
right?
I'll say this: if I make any headway on that, you will never talk to me again. I'll retire a multimillionaire with one good guess, and then I'll be out.
Well, maybe you'll still join us every.
That's right, from my
every so
island.
often for Unscripted.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so my team, I can't believe this happened. It's more of a headline, which it could have fit in with the segment too, but it's this talk about grasshoppers out west. And I first heard about it from Greg Henderson of Drovers. He had mentioned it, but it's the way that the LA Times writes their headlines, right? And as a journalist, I know you have to write it in a way that people are actually going to click on it. And so, we know, for example, Eric, that if we want a farmer to click on a headline, we cannot put in there climate change. We cannot put in there things like that. I mean, farmers really aren't going to click on it. We've learned that. But the LA Times, their headline this week was Grasshopper Apocalypse. Why these farmers are bracing for an insect invasion. And I didn't realize that grasshoppers were so bad this year. I think it was a few years ago where like Montana and North Dakota, and I remember grasshoppers demolishing the crop. I remember there was an armyworm infestation. But Eric, we're preparing for 4-H County Fair next week. And I finally found my first grasshopper this week, but we haven't had it where we are. So it just surprised me a bit that apparently grasshoppers are taking over. Apocalypse, it's the LA Times. So we can take that with a grain of salt. But
LA Times are Genesis chapter 7? You pick whatever.
Right.
Or no, I guess that'd be Exodus, not Genesis. Genesis 7 is 1. So somewhere in Exodus, we can go back and talk about it. But yeah.
No, we did have a pretty bad locust outbreak in Africa and parts of the Middle East a few years back,
yes.
and it was weather. Yes, it was weather driven, right? Based on moisture coming into that region, the certain time of year, and kind of helping kick that off. And so that, once in a while, weather does have a role in playing some of these outbreaks.
Did you have locusts, Eric? I mean, I saw some photos. It wasn't locusts. What is it that's impact? Cicadas. Yes, cicadas. Yeah. I saw some of the photos from St. Louis of the cicada. I mean, it was like you couldn't even walk outside. They were covered, and we don't have them here in Kansas City, but St. Louis, it was completely covered.
Yeah, I went over to Decatur for a soccer tournament with my son. This is very near like ADM's headquarters, and we were at a little university called Millikan University, and where we parked, I walked up to a tree because you could see some cicadas around the ground. What I didn't realize until I got next to it was the entirety of the trunk was covered in cicada. Like it was, the whole thing was like a layer of cicada, and they made this awful noise. And then when you park, they would eventually just kind of get to my truck, and they were all over the wheels and all over everything. And like, you can't brush them off. You just have to drive away. And it was such a massive mess this particular year. But yes, they I was out actually, how your watch can measure sound. I was actually out there and measured 94 decibels with one of them.
Oh,
Like
that's loud.
that's really loud. But I was right up next to it. And so anyways, yes, our cicada problem here, thank goodness it's ended. But for a while there, it was really bad.
Eric, we talked about movies. I think in Twister 2 or Twisters.
Twisters, yeah.
Yeah, I think they ought to have a moment where they're running through a field and all you can hear are the cicadas. And then you turn around and see the Twister coming on its way. And of course, it will sound like a freight train, which is how all tornadoes are described.
That's right. Well, in the original Twister, the sounds that they used to make the tornado that was the first one that went after them when they were driving in the ditch, they used camel moans, like camel moaning, and pig squealing. That was the noises that they chose. So no freight trains in that one. Camels and pigs is what they decided the sound guys to use for that one.
The most random facts that we are learning today.
You're not going to get these facts aren't available anywhere but here. That's what I'm saying.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's go to our last segment, My Fantastic Life. All right, Eric, I know you go camping every year with your family. So I talked to you last week for our 4th of July show. Instead of talking markets, it's so depressing. We talked weather, which apparently was a little bit more depressing. But anyway, you had a nice trip with your family. Anything else kind of personal wise that's happened in the last few weeks that you want to share?
No, what's funny is that vacation we've gone on, this is my 45th year. I'm only 44. So my first time I was 3 months old going up to northern Wisconsin. We do it every year. It's a great time to spend with family. But to kind of come full circle here, you keep talking about all these random facts. One of the things I do up there every year with the group we go to is I put on a trivia night, and we play trivia for 3 hours, and I write all the questions and toss them all out there. And it's a lot of fun. We have a good time doing that stuff. But yeah, that's just a nice getaway. Unfortunately, I choose to go on vacation like around the 4th of July, which is like critical for Midwest, crops. And here I am in a place. And as you know, I was sitting in my dad's Suburban on my phone trying to get a good internet connection while I was up there. But that's kind of the reason I go. You don't have good internet up there, and you can kind of get away. But yeah, that was a lot of fun, and certainly something that I enjoy.
Well, that's awesome. My fantastic life this week was a similar story. Went down to Oklahoma, spent some time with family, and got all of the cousins together. I think, we've got all the way from, 2 or 3 years old all the way up to 16. And so we take pictures of all the kids next to each other. And my crew looked like giants compared to everybody else, which is okay. I spent some time, Tyne, and I think you'll appreciate this, going tubing on the lake there. And I will say that, the older you get, the more you bounce and the harder it is to hang on. Oh. So I had my fair share of getting tossed around on the tube. So
it was a
good time though.
When I think of Oklahoma lakes, I think that they're all red because of the red dirt.
This is Lake Tint-Killer. So this is like in the northeast near Tahlequah. Very nice lake. Very nice.
Listen, it's not like I can frown upon other lakes. We have the Ozarks. And yeah, it may be fun, but it is disgusting. And I'm sure you Eric, have a random fact about how disgusting the Lake of the Ozarks is.
Well, I'll tell you, I have an old boat, and I do the same thing. I take kids out tubing every day on vacation, and it's a blast. But the lake I go to up north is sand bottom. So it was carved out when the glaciers left. And so the water is, it looks like you could drink it. But near us, where I do go boating here, we have a lake called Clinton Lake. It's got a big power plant on it. And when you were talking earlier, Clinton, about the heat in the desert Southwest, last August, we took the boat around to where the hot ditch comes out of the power plant. So it's a really long hot ditch, but it's used to cool the reactor. And we measured water temperatures of 120 degrees. It was just like, but that part of the lake stays unfrozen all year long. They fish it all year long. But, like most Illinois lakes, it's a dammed up river, and of course does have, the water's not crystal clear. So I love going up north and just getting in that water where you could fish and see your lure and watch the bass take it. And boy, I now you got me talking about it. I miss it and ready to go back.
See?
So, yeah.
Yep.
Well, mine, I mean, we're preparing for county fair. So most of you have been there. Yeah. And I go, my dad, who's a retired ag teacher, Eric, he taught ag for years. And so now that he's retired, he subs driving the bus for a nearby school. He also helps with their ag program. So he loves it. And then he helps us with 4-H. And I said, Dad, I don't understand. Like, we are outside every night this week trying to collect insects, because that was his. We already have the cake done, we have photos done, we have other things done, but we were collecting insects. And I'm like, Dad, why are we, it's really ticking me off. Why are we waiting till the last minute to do all of this? This is stressing me out. And he laughs and he goes, this is 4-H tradition, Tyne. You always wait to the last minute to do your 4-H projects. And I'm like, this isn't funny, okay? I am angry right now because this is every night and it doesn't have to be this way. We have had all year to collect insects. Anyway,
no, you only get the last week before it.
They've loved it. I mean, like they get, the butterflies, the dragonflies, grasshoppers, other insects that they're getting. They are so excited. And so that is the one that the nice thing, I took them out and we had photography lessons and they love photography. My oldest, who's 9, she was like, Mom, can I get a camera like yours, which I use for work? And I'm like, Kinsler, I don't think you understand what these cost, but it's fun. It is fun to see these kids like just try different things and see what's out there. And so that's just the beauty of 4-H and FFA. But before we go, though, my fantastic life, it's not mine, but on social media, we are one big family. There is a woman in Kansas who celebrated her 90th harvest. Okay. So this is a tweet that we want to
I love this one.
KC and Central Kansas. It's her 90th harvest. And all I want to know is I want to ask Barbara, what is her secret to youth? Because before I read that caption, I did not think she was 90 years old. She's with her granddaughter, who actually works for MKC in this photo. And it is, I mean, Clinton, you've been in Oklahoma, your wife's from Oklahoma. You lived in Kansas for years. You know that harvesting wheat is not for the faint of heart. Can you imagine 90 of those?
Oh, that's just incredible. That's what a great testament to her legacy and her story. And, harvest is great no matter where you go. But I will say that kind of winter wheat harvest through the Southern Plains, there's just something about, I don't know if it's the sunsets while the combine's running, you know what I mean? I don't know if it's just like the hustle of it all, trying to beat storms and the rains that are coming, because there's going to be a pop-up shower and you're going to be shut down for a day and a half. I don't know what it is, but there's just something that's a little bit magical about it. And I've always just really liked it. And so this is why I saw this earlier this week. This is a great story, and congrats to her.
Yeah, you have to have a lot of grit to farm out there for sure. And there is something magical about wheat harvest. Well, that does it for Unscripted this week. Eric, we hope that you'll join us again. I have learned so much about you. Like, I have a whole new appreciation for Eric Snodgrass, the weather wizard now.
Eric, I'm looking for a 75-minute video when Twisters comes out, breaking down the science of it. I'm just saying, I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to sit down with a bucket of popcorn and watch your viewing of that.
You have to watch his first video that he did, that 75-minute video first. Yeah. We got to Google that first, and then we can look for part 2.
That sounds like a plan. Maybe I should just put out an open invitation to buy at a theater and just get everybody to go watch it with us, and we'll have a good old time and see what there is to see.
See,
that's right. Yeah.
You have a fan club, so I'm sure that you could charge for tickets and people would show up, Eric. I'm just telling you.
I don't, back to what we said at the beginning. They're fans of a chubby dad who's just interested in weather. That's really what it is. So, yeah.
Eric, thank you for joining us.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Eric. We appreciate it. All right, well, Clinton, what a good conversation. I learned a lot about Eric.
Well, and I also learned that if I have a trivia night coming up anytime soon, I know who I'm going to try to get to join us. Because we're a shoo-in to win that, dude.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I'm serious. I don't even, is Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, is that still on television? I don't even know. But
I don't know.
So, if you're ever on a trivia show, you may want to just go ahead and put Eric Snodgrass in your phone and have him on speed dial, because
dial that guy up. He's got
impressed.
It. Very cool. Very cool. Well, Tyne, very unscripted today. But very cool, lots of cool information, and it's good to see you. It's good,
Good to see you too.
It's just good to see you.
Yeah, I got to go because I've got some bugs to collect. I got to go out here and outside the office and see if there's different insects here.
Run out of time.
We've got 50 bugs to collect, Clinton. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
You better get on it. They can't all be cicadas.
I asked actually Matt Mormon, who went back to St. Louis. I said, if you haven't left your home yet, can you bring us back some cicadas? And he had already left. So anyway.
I'm sure someone will help you.
Well, thank you for joining us this weekend. I'm Tyne Morgan.
I'm Clinton Griffiths. Live life unscripted.
Thanks for joining us. You can dive into more of Unscripted on Farm Journal's YouTube channel and listen to it anywhere podcasts are found. I'm Clinton Griffiths.
And I'm Tyne Morgan. From all of us here at Farm Journal, keep it real as you live your life unscripted.
Unscripted is a production of Farm Journal Studios, where no one grows alone.